In the frozen mud of the Hyrcan forest, a 19-year-old from Ohio cracked open a tin the size of his fist and spooned cold meat hash into his mouth. No fire, no plate, no choice. What he ate that night was designed by food scientists, tested in government labs, and engineered to keep a man alive long enough to fight another day. Some of it tasted like cardboard soaked in salt. Some was so calorie-dense it made soldiers gag. One item on this list was so hated that veterans still talk about it 80 years later with laughter and shudder. Yet a few foods were brilliant. Techniques developed during World War II reshaped the American food supply. Instant coffee, freeze-dried vegetables, fortified chocolate, powdered everything. Grocery stores today look the way they do because of what soldiers ate between 1941 and 1945. Hardtack was a staple. Dense, pale squares of flour and water baked twice until all moisture was gone. A single cracker could survive months in a pack without spoiling. Soldiers carried them as emergency backup when everything else ran out. The texture was somewhere between a ceramic tile and a very serious suggestion of food. Men soaked them in canteen water, crumbled them into hot coffee, or bit down and accepted the consequences. Hardtack had been feeding armies since the Civil War. During World War II, crackers evolved slightly into compressed biscuits inside rations, but the principle remained: give a soldier calories that weigh almost nothing and never spoil. In the Pacific, supply lines could be cut for weeks, making these crackers sometimes the only solid food a unit had for days. Bouillon cubes were another staple. A foil-wrapped cube the size of a thumbnail could be dropped into a canteen cup of boiling water to make something technically qualifying as soup. The sodium content was staggering. A single cube could make a modern nutritionist pale. Yet salt kept men going. It replaced what sweat stripped out during 16-hour marches through jungle heat or desert sun. Medics in North Africa used bouillon broth to treat dehydration. The warmth of a hot cup, even one tasting mostly of salt and chemicals, had a psychological effect food scientists had not quantified. Soldiers stirred it into crackers, canned hash, and powdered eggs, making everything slightly more bearable. Lemon powder was tucked into ration kits as a vitamin supplement and morale booster. Mixed with water, it turned faintly yellow and tasted aggressively artificial, but sweet. In a diet dominated by salt, grease, and tin-flavored meat, something sweet was extraordinary. Soldiers hoarded lemon packets, rationing them across days, sometimes just licking a finger to get a hit of sweetness. Vitamin C was not a gimmick. Scurvy, which plagued armies for centuries, was a concern in isolated Pacific garrisons. Lemon powder worked, and there were no significant scurvy outbreaks among American troops. These bright yellow packets quietly saved lives. Canned pork and beans were the entry-level comfort food. A small tin with a dull green label contained navy beans and tomato sauce, and small chunks of pork pressure cooked until they surrendered texture and personality. Eaten cold in a foxhole, they were filling, calorie-dense, and surprisingly familiar. Soldiers described them as the one ration that tasted like something their mothers might have made. Pork and beans required no preparation. An infantryman could eat a can in under 2 minutes, even with no spoon. Among ration items, it consistently ranked as one of the least hated. Chewing gum had a serious purpose. It stimulated saliva, aiding digestion of dry rations, and reduced the perception of hunger. Wrigley spearmint and double mint were pulled from civilian sale to supply the military. Soldiers chewed through enormous quantities. The rhythmic jaw movement provided calm in high-stress situations. Gum became currency among soldiers, used for trading with locals and fellow troops. Millions of sticks were printed each week for the armed forces, an indispensable tool in keeping men functional and focused. World War II changed mornings. Before 1941, instant coffee existed but was grainy and weak. The military needed something different. Soldiers could not brew coffee but needed caffeine, warmth, and the reminder they were human. The Army developed soluble coffee powder that dissolved completely in hot or cold water. By 1943, millions of tins were shipped to every theater. Spray drying techniques, solubility improvements, and flavor preservation went into the commercial instant coffee industry after the war. The cup your grandfather poured in 1962 existed because his unit ran out of percolators in Italy in 1944. Spam deserves mention. Hormel shipped over 100 million pounds to Allied forces, including the British and Soviet armies. Spam is pork shoulder ham, salt, water, and sodium nitrite, cooked in the can. It requires no refrigeration, needs no preparation, and lasts longer than most soldiers. Fried cold in crackers, boiled into stew, or mixed with powdered eggs, it was hated at first, tolerated later, and eventually a lifeline. Spam did not win the war, but it fed the army that did. Powdered eggs were universally despised. Dehydrated into a pale yellow dust, they reconstituted into scrambled eggs when mixed with water and heated. conceptually sound, execution disastrous. Soldiers complained of sulfuric flavor, rubbery texture, and suspicious color. Surveys showed powdered eggs were the most disliked ration item. Soldiers would rather go hungry than eat 4 mornings consecutively. The Army issued them anyway, because they provided complete protein, fat, and vitamins, essential whether palatable or not. The D-ration emergency chocolate bar was engineered to taste slightly bad. Hershey's created it under Army instructions to ensure soldiers consumed it only when no other food was available. 4 ounces of compressed chocolate, oat flour, powdered milk, and cocoa fat delivered 600 calories and resisted heat up to 120 degrees. Soldiers described it as chocolate-flavored chalk. Hershey delivered over 3 billion bars. When everything else was gone, this intentionally unpleasant chocolate bar kept men standing. Canned corned beef hash came in a small flat tin containing diced potato, shredded beef, and enough salt to preserve it. Cold, it was dense and sticky. Heated, it resembled a meal. The formula used during World War II was nearly identical to the commercial product that appeared later. Technology, canning process, and preservation methods transferred directly. Soldiers returning home were already familiar with canned hash, which became a post-war bestseller. The Creation breakfast unit was a small rectangular box designed to fit in a soldier's shirt pocket. Containing compressed biscuits, a tin of chopped ham and eggs, a fruit bar, soluble coffee, 4 cigarettes, and chewing gum, it delivered roughly 3,000 calories across 3 daily units. Real combat operations burned 4,500 to 6,000 calories daily. Soldiers who lived on Creations for more than a week lost weight noticeably. Paratroopers jumping into Normandy carried Creations in every pocket, sometimes surviving 9 days without a hot meal. Canned meat and vegetable stew was the prestige item of C rations, containing recognizable chunks of beef, potato, and carrot in thick brown sauce. Heated on Jeep engine blocks or in shallow, sun-warmed pools, it provided warmth, comfort, and a brief reprieve from combat. Stew was luxury. In a diet dominated by powdered eggs and sulfured fruit bars, it was the closest thing to a Sunday family meal. Processed American cheese came in small tins as a dense orange block. Soldiers ate it on crackers, melted it into ration hash, or traded it with locals unfamiliar with processed cheese. It required no refrigeration, contained protein and fat, and survived extreme conditions. The American military's massive cheese contracts during World War II built the infrastructure for the modern processed cheese industry. The sliced cheese in your refrigerator today descends directly from what soldiers ate in the mud of the Rhineland. Fruit bars were compressed dried fruit providing calories, sweetness, and B vitamins. Soldiers craving flavor in a world of salt and grease found brief brightness in these bars. A fruit bar in a foxhole reminded men of pie in a quiet kitchen, a small connection to a world beyond combat. Pemmican, used in early Pacific campaigns and Alaska operations, was rendered beef fat and dried beef compressed into a brick, roughly 3,500 calories per pound. Pemmican didn't spoil, influencing freeze-drying techniques and shaping post-war food industry development. Canned bacon offered pre-cooked strips in grease. Heating it over a small flame, soldiers experienced the smell of home, even in the field. Bacon became a ritual, a psychological comfort that temporarily transformed men into people rather than targets. The 10-in-1 ration fed 10 men in one waterproof box, including meat, crackers, coffee, sugar, jam, evaporated milk, hard candy, cigarettes, and toilet paper. Communal cooking strengthened cohesion and reduced combat fatigue. Hard candy, including butterscotch, lemon drops, and peppermint, stimulated saliva, reduced hunger, and delivered quick sugar. Soldiers shared it with liberated children and prisoners, building goodwill and small acts of humanity. The meat hash unit was the most despised item, a gray, clay-like mass of beef, pork, or chicken. Calorie-dense, but unpalatable. Yet, it kept soldiers alive. Ironically, military meat hash formulas influenced post-war pet food development. Sugar tablets provided emergency energy, especially for airborne troops operating behind enemy lines. 40 calories each, they kept men functional during critical moments. Canned fruit cocktail was treated like dessert, a luxurious treat of peaches, pears, grapes, and cherries in heavy syrup. Sweet, familiar food reduced anxiety markers in soldiers under prolonged stress. Evaporated milk proved versatile. Medics used it to settle gastrointestinal issues, and soldiers stirred it into coffee, temporarily returning to a kitchen in America. Simple comforts reduced acute stress, shaping ration design for decades. Instant coffee, reintroduced as Nescafé, became a symbol of survival. A cup in freezing Belgium or Germany could be the difference between a man functioning or not. Coffee was warmth, caffeine, and ritual, heating water, measuring powder, pouring a cup, a 5-minute act of civilization. K-ration cigarettes served as functional tools. 4 cigarettes per kit suppressed appetite, reduced the perception of cold, and sharpened focus. Shared smoking moments created social bonding and, for many, initiated lifelong habits. Finally, the most beloved item in the entire American military ration system was the C-ration pound cake. A small, dense yellow cake in a flat tin, soldiers traded and hid it, savoring it alone. Army food historians found it mentioned positively more than any other item. Not the coffee, not the stew, not the cigarettes, the pound cake. A 19-year-old in a foxhole in the Ardennes on Christmas Day, 1944, wrote home that it was the best thing he had eaten all year. He was probably right, not because the cake was extraordinary, but because he ate it alive. 25 foods, millions of men, a war fought on powdered eggs, bad chocolate, and one beloved tin of pound cake. From the frozen mud of the Ardennes to the jungles of the Pacific, every bite carried more than calories. It carried survival, ingenuity, morale, and a quiet, often overlooked history shaping the food we eat today. The grocery stores we visit, the instant coffee we drink, the canned goods on our shelves, the freeze-dried meals in camping aisles, all carry the DNA of what soldiers ate to survive. Each item tells a story of adaptation, science, and endurance. Which one would you have traded everything else for? My money is on the pound cake. It always was.